everyone, it's Holmes from Storybooks, and I'm doing a discussion video today. Apologies in a delayed video. I had a cold and now I have whooping cough, so if I sound terrible and croaky, it's because I work in a public library with a lot of very germy people. This discussion is all about what happens when the representation in a book is great, but the writing or the creative decisions are very poor. It's about how, as a member of a marginalized community, you might have different expectations of a book because of its representation. I recently read The Pants Project by Clarke, which is about a trans middle schooler who doesn't want to wear a skirt because that is not affirming for them. However, they are required to wear a skirt as part of their uniform. The representation in the book was fine. The main character, Liv, also has two mums, so there's that element of representation as well, but my god, the writing was so dry. It felt so flat. There was no description or atmosphere. Every chapter was so formulaic. It was like, I went to school, this thing happened at my school, my bully said a thing, my friend said a thing, I came home, my parents are cool and normal, my brother is annoying. End chapter. It sucks because I don't think I can recommend this book purely for the writing. I gave it 2 stars and I'm not sure if the author is trans, however that really doesn't deter me as much as it might for other members of the bookish community. It's entirely plausible that Clarke is trans and hasn't disclosed to the entire world that they are trans, and that's more than okay. Being visibly trans to an entire world of strangers is a risk some choose not to take, and that's their choice, and I respect them for it. I was talking to a non-binary friend about the Pants Project, and they felt the same way. The representation in the book was fine, but the whole book was drier than the paper that it was written on. We both grimaced when mentioning this book because we both wanted to like it so much. We had such high hopes for it. And while representation in books has increased from when I was a teenager, it was mostly stories about young, able-bodied cisgender gay men. The disappointment from reading a badly written queer book doesn't go away. It's bittersweet when the representation in a book is fine, but the writing is bad. Because on the one hand, I am affirmed by this character existing, but on the other hand, I have taste and I'm allowed to be critical of a book I didn't enjoy. And then I sit back and wish with all my heart that literally any other writer had written this book so that this character could live up to their full potential, I suppose. The whole discussion gets more complex when you start considering intersections of identity as well. If you have a character that is Latinx, non-binary, and neurodivergent, is it likely that the author will get every aspect of your lived experience right? Not always, even though people are layered and complex and deserve all aspects of their identity represented. I am queer, disabled, and adopted, and while I've seen adopted and queer books and disabled and queer books, I've yet to see one with all three. But I exist, and I'm here, and where's my book? How many books are there about cisgender heterosexual couples discussing their marital issues, or coming-of-age stories about young girls, or someone on a hero's journey, or a classic about a long-lost love, as long as that love is heterosexual? This is a discussion for another time, but I wholly believe the reason I struggled with lesbian literature for a long time was because I was actually genderqueer and hadn't identified myself on that spectrum of identity yet. The Pants Project reminds me of another disappointing LGBTQ+ read, and that is Beijing Comrades by Beijing Tongzhi. Tongzhi means comrade, and it's a pseudonym. Beijing Comrades is famous for its episodic style. It was published in fan fiction type chapters on China's dark web and in many LGBTQ+ chat rooms, disappearing and popping up time after time. It was essentially collected and smuggled out of China and then translated with the author's permission, though the author remains anonymous. It is one of China's few LGBTQ+ books out there, period. There are very, very few LGBTQ+ Chinese books that are published because of censorship. In my experience, much of the queer fiction that comes from that part of the world comes from Taiwan or Hong Kong, whereas this comes from mainland China, so it's an important book. And I fucking hated it. The writing, a lot like fanfiction, focused on 2 central characters, dialogue heavy and dramatic. That was fine with me. But the main character, Han Dong, was a manipulative asshole. And I don't mean that he was the anti-hero or an antagonist. I mean like he was literally a fuckboy. He's a selfish, arrogant prick who wants what he wants and is upset when he doesn't get precisely what he wants. I hated his voice and I hated him, and I rolled my eyes into the back of his head whenever he complained about something. And yeah, you could make the point that his assholery comes from his internalized homophobia, and you would be right, but anytime there was a lull in the story, the author would make Han Dong be abusive till he got his way, and I was tired of it. When we finally heard from Lan Yu, his boyfriend, I nearly cried out with joy. Finally, I would understand why Lan Yu was obsessed with this man who was cruel, cold, and unforgiving. And then the chapter ended and they got in another fight. It made for a wonderful book club discussion. Who was the author? Was it written by a man or a woman? I disagreed with someone and said it could definitely be written by a woman, especially if the translator uses she pronouns in the introduction, although I don't assume people's identities, so it could be anyone. But reading through it was painful, forced, and made for an overall miserable reading experience. Books like The Pants Project by Clarke and Beijing Comrades are why I'm hesitant to try new, more diverse material when it comes out. What if it's not good? What if it's my experience? Does that mean my experience is invalid? Of course not, but it does mean that I have to take it with a grain of salt and settle for this depiction of a part of myself which somewhere along the line filled some quota about diversity in a publishing house or a production room. This quota can only be filled once a year or twice a year or once a season, which means that if I don't like the representation, I have to wait until something else comes out before I start the whole process again. Tracy Lindbergh, author of Birdie, asked one year, where are the First Nation summer reads? Where are their blockbuster films? Their paranormal paperbacks? There's this idea that because you are a marginalized author, you can only write about your marginalized experience, and only if you are a model minority. A model minority comes from the concept of stereotypes like Asians are good at math. This stereotype, while it can be positive, is incredibly damaging because it holds every single person who falls under that umbrella to an impossible standard. And when that individual can't perform to that standard, we blame them rather than the pointless stereotype. That Tracy Lindbergh thread descended into a discussion about how minorities write their stories and publishers still publish them for white consumption. But I think that's a discussion for another video. There's another point that I should make as well. I discussed the Pants Project lackluster performance with many co-workers, but only the queer or gender variant co-workers understood what I was talking about. When I tried to share with others, there was a pause, a hesitation to respond, and I quickly found myself without words to articulate what I was trying to say. As Adriana from Perpetual Pages so eloquently said, well, now queer folks are fighting to be seen. Now they've been seen in this book or this movie or this TV show, but it's not enough to be present as if this is a roll call or something. We should be respected and understood. Adriana, you are a gem, a wonder. You are smart and articulate and are such a valuable member of this community. Thank you for your insight, your support, and your ability to find words when I had none. You're the best. If you don't follow Adriana already, please do. They are critical of their reading while still being compassionate, and I learned so much from watching their videos. This brings me to my final point in the discussion, which is that after all these experiences, I cautiously look forward to diverse media that represents me, but it takes me a long time to work up the courage to watch them at all. And while I'm watching these videos, reading these books, consuming this media, I'm doing so with bated breath, praying, hoping there is representation at every level of this production, at every meeting, in every creative process. Why am I nervous to watch Special, a Netflix series about a gay man with cerebral palsy, the disability that I have, that presents in very similar ways to me? A movie called Margarita with a Straw, made in 2014 about a young bisexual film and music student with cerebral palsy. It came highly rated on IMDb, so my wife and I decided to watch it. Although on paper it sounded incredible, 2 disabled people fall in love, one of them a woman of color, with all of the family drama and beautiful backdrops of New York and India. It was okay. It was pretty lukewarm for me, nothing to write home about. It apparently received a standing ovation at the Toronto Film Festival, but I found it pretty boring and tropey. My wife and I were joking about this film and playing a queer tropes bingo card. Homophobic family? Check. Bisexual character cheating on someone? Ding ding ding. Hot white guy that serves as a distraction? Also check. I'm pretty sure there's a love triangle in there, so yeah. It's a trope fest. Looking up this film to talk about it in this discussion video, I learned that the main actress in this film didn't even have cerebral palsy. While the director was keen to hire an actress with cerebral palsy for the part, she eventually went with someone who didn't have it at all. I read a review and it was like, I can't even believe she doesn't have CP. You'd never believe it, it's just like the real thing. Which, yeah. Also, the other main character doesn't have a disability, even though some of the film was shot in a cerebral palsy community league where there are plenty of disabled characters and they were used in the background. So despite being a champion for diversity, I'm disappointed in the director's creative choices, and I think you should skip the film and go for Special instead. Special is written by a gay man with cerebral palsy, but again, upon seeing it pop up in my recommended watch list, I was like, okay, does this mean I won't ever get a story about a disabled person who's not a man with cerebral palsy? How many years will I have to wait for that? I shouldn't have to set my taste aside in order to see myself in media. And it's not that there aren't queer disabled adopted authors writing stories, because I know there are, but where are they facing barriers? At the publishing houses? With their editors? Can they even afford to support and write for themselves? Meanwhile, marginalized communities continue to have their stories fed to them through inauthentic channels. And when we question or are critical of representation, we're told that it will get better, quote unquote, or that we should just celebrate the good that we do have. I don't mean to sound bitter or jaded, but this idea has been gnawing at my mind for a while, so I decided to speak it into the void to see if it would leave me be. What can be done about these gaps in our creative industries, and how do we fill them? Great question. We can, of course, write letters to publishing houses, TV stations, and producers demanding better representation by people who fit that community. Like Rick Riordan, we can open publishing houses, especially for marginalized authors, and give them space to tell their stories. But all of these things take time and money, and how long do they last? Progress is always being made, but I still think it will be a while until I read a story about a genderqueer disabled adopted kid, unless you have a recommendation, of course. Let's talk in the comments below. Bye, everyone.